My name is Ruth Walzer, and I was in World War II, and I was one of the family. My mother, my father, my brother, and I were all in it at the same time. Now, I started off with my mother asking me if I was going to go in the Army. And I said, oh, yeah. And so we decided we would go and join in together. Well, it just so happens that I lived in Camden, New Jersey, and we didn't have an embarkation place. I had to go across the Delaware River to Philadelphia to sign in, which I did, but my mother didn't bring her children's ages with her, and they had to be at least 18 or married, and both of my sisters were married, so she had to prove, of course, all this. And so I went to the first WAC training center in Des Moines, Iowa. My mother got to go to Florida to the second WAC training center, and we never saw one another after that in the service. She was on a furlough at one time and brought one of my grandchildren with her so that they would get to see me. Anyway, I started in, and the first thing they did was put me in a special battalion and ship me to Washington, D.C. And we were in this battalion. We spent about a year with spit and polish to prove to the government that women could man guns as well as men, if not better. And so we had to learn to drive through the forest and whatever you want to call it in the dark and load the ammunition onto trucks to be shipped to the guns. And this went on, as I say, for about a year, and finally the day came we were going to have our inspection. Well, the government wasn't off the post 5 minutes when we were all scattered. Women were not going to man guns. Well, of course, that's 60-some years ago. A lot has happened since then. And I was put into Fort Myer, Virginia, which is right alongside of the Capitol. And I had always wanted to get into motor transport. But they said, I'm sorry, but you have to be at least 5'6" to get into motor transport. And I was just barely 5 foot. Well, all of a sudden I heard they were having a mechanical test. And I said, oh, well, that's where I'll shine, because I should have been a boy instead of a girl, because I like to do all the boy things. And I took the test and came out with such a high score. They said, we're making a mechanic out of you. So that's what they did. They put me in to be a mechanic. And the first thing they did was said, do you have a driver's license? I said, well, I have a civilian license, but not an Army one. They said, well, go get your license. So I went a short distance and picked up my license and came back. I'm now part of what I wanted to begin with. And so when we were scattered, I wound up in the motor pool. And I was in the motor pool for quite a while, driving the generals to the Pentagon and wherever they needed to go. I know one time one of the generals wanted me to take him out into the country. He was looking for a place to set up another camp. And then another one always wanted me to take him to the Pentagon because I could drive smoothly, and he never knew I was shifting gears. And he could sleep all the way there and all the way back. So I got there, and then they needed somebody in the office. Oh, I said, well, I'm a clerk typist. And so I wound up as a clerk typist. And later on, I decided, well, maybe I should go overseas. So I went for overseas training. And at that time, I had a spec number as a clerk typist. I went through all my basic training, took all my shots, all these long drills we had to go through and everything. And I'm all set now to go somewhere. And they said, well, I'm sorry, but we've got more clerk typists overseas than we know what to do with, and half of them have never seen a typewriter. So that was the end of that. They said, well, now, you have a right to go to any post in the United States that you would like to go to. Well, I didn't know anything about any of the other posts except the one I had been in. So I figured, well, why don't I just go back where I came from? So I did that, and in the meantime, they had brought a bunch of men in that were waiting for their points to come up to be discharged. And I happened to see one of them, fall in love with them, and so he and I decided we're going to get married. So we set a wedding date, and then my discharge came in, and I would have been being discharged at another camp because I didn't discharge the women from where I was, and I would have been there when I was supposed to be getting married. Well, that was bad luck to change your wedding date, so we said we're not changing our wedding date. So we went ahead and got married, and then we went on our furlough. And after that, it was like 10 days between my discharge and his discharge. So we just met, and that was the end of my service to the United States. And I would go back today if I wasn't too old, but I'm afraid I'm too old now.
Show your picture of you in your uniform.
And
when was that taken, Ruth?
Probably in 1943.
43? And when did you get your uniform? Was it before you were discharged, or did you wear that when you were driving your generals? Or?
Oh, yes, I had to wear the uniform the minute I got out of bed in the morning until I went to bed at night.
You also have your hat. Is that your hat, dear?
And these are the hats we had to wear. Of course, nobody likes a hat. As you can see why.
Well, you had such pretty hair. I bet you kind of hated to put it on. Look how pretty your hair is in that picture there. So what are what's your patch mean over here on the side and your ribbons on the...
Well, these each are a medal that we received. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember what the different ones are.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. And your patch over here on the side, is that...
Oh,
was that during the war, or was that after?
No, this was during the war. That was part of my uniform.
You were part of the Catholic War Veterans?
Well, is that what this is? Okay, yeah. I belong to the Catholic War Veterans now, and this was their patch. Mm-hmm. And I think we had long sleeve shirts.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said something about when you all were out there on the shooting range, and you and the other women had done such a good job with the shooting range. on inspection or something? Wasn't there a story
Well,
about
when
that?
they came through, the government came through to see what this was all about. The women on the 40 millimeter and 90 millimeter guns were showing them what they did. And they found that they were more accurate and more conscious of what was going on than the men were. And they got a much better picture of it. But they still said women will not man guns. Well, you know what's happened today. They're not only manning guns, they're going to the front lines.
So you all were really a women's liberation movement.
Well, we
For
were the
women to be in
starting
the-
of the women in the service.
Yeah.
And the women in the service today thank us because we were the ones that made it possible for them to be in the service.
Do you have any message or anything that you'd like to tell America's youth about, about the sacrifices that were made in World War II and how everyone worked together? And
Well, yes, we had to train the same as the men. I went to Des Moines, Iowa in November and got out of there on February. So it took all that time to get us through. And I don't know, it's just that we got into that one battalion and then went to the service. But I went anywhere they needed somebody. Now, sometimes it was in a warehouse, and sometimes it was driving an automobile, maybe a truck. And we were allowed to drive up to 2.5-ton trucks. And other times I went to the office because I needed somebody in the office. I just went anywhere I was needed because I got into the service to help in any way I could.
to keep freedom,
Yes,
to preserve our
freedom was the big thing. And, well, if we didn't have freedom today, we wouldn't know how to act.
We wouldn't have anything.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for your service to our country, Ruth. We
You're
really
quite
appreciate it.
welcome.